I'm 85 years old, and most of the people I spent my life trying to impress would struggle to remember my name today. That's a strange thing to admit out loud. It feels almost childish at my age, like confessing a schoolyard mistake when your hair has already turned white. But it's the truth that sits with me now. In the quiet mornings, when the house doesn't make any sound except the refrigerator humming, and the clock reminding me that time is still moving, even if my body isn't moving much with it anymore. I'm not telling you this because I want sympathy. I don't have the energy for sympathy. I'm telling you because I don't have many years left. And the truth has become heavier than embarrassment. When you're young, you don't think in terms of endings. You think in terms of next steps, next job, next raise, next house, next recognition. I used to believe that life was a ladder. You climbed it carefully, rung by rung, and one day you'd look down and see how far you'd come. What I didn't understand is that ladders are often leaning against the wrong wall, and by the time you realize it, your knees aren't strong enough to climb down. In my 20s, I was full of nervous energy, not confidence, nervous energy. I mistook the two for each other. I thought being busy meant being important. I thought being admired meant being valued. I worked long hours, even when nobody asked me to. I stayed late at the office because I liked the way it looked when the boss walked past and saw my desk light still on. It made me feel visible. At home, my wife would sometimes be sitting at the table with dinner already cold. She wouldn't yell. She would just say, "I kept it warm as long as I could." At the time, I heard that as understanding. Now, I hear it as loneliness. Back then, I told myself I was doing it for us, for stability, for a future where we wouldn't have to worry. And I wasn't entirely wrong. We did build a comfortable life, a decent house, 2 cars, vacations once every couple of years. But comfort has a quiet cost. It doesn't send you a bill in the mail. It just takes small things from you without announcing it. I missed birthdays because of important meetings. I missed school plays because I was too tired. I postponed dinners with friends because I had deadlines. Each one felt reasonable. None of them felt like a betrayal in the moment. That's the dangerous part. Regret rarely comes from one big dramatic decision. It comes from 1,000 tiny permissions you give yourself to be absent. In my 30s and 40s, I became known as reliable, dependable, the man who always delivered results. I wore those words like medals. I didn't notice that the people giving me those medals were people I would never see again once I retired. My children learned not to expect me at certain things. They stopped asking directly. They would say, "If you're not busy?" I always was busy, or I told myself I was. There were evenings when I would sit in my car in the driveway, engine off, rehearsing how I'd describe my day so it sounded impressive. I wanted admiration at home the same way I wanted it at work. I didn't realize admiration is a poor substitute for presence. My wife used to reach for my hand while we watched television. At some point, she stopped. I can't tell you exactly when that happened. There wasn't a fight. There wasn't a dramatic conversation. Just a gradual fading, like a color left too long in the sun. I told myself this was adulthood. That passion settles down. That routine replaces excitement. What I didn't understand was that routine can also replace connection if you're not careful. I kept chasing approval from people who only knew my job title. People who would nod politely at company events and forget my face by the next quarter. I dressed for them. I spoke carefully around them. I measured my worth through their reactions. And every year I felt slightly more hollow, though I didn't have the language for it then. I just thought I needed the next achievement, the next promotion, the next thing that would finally make me feel settled. But finally is a word that keeps moving forward. It never stays where you place it. The turning point didn't come with fireworks. It came with a hospital room that smelled like disinfectant and stale air. My wife had been sick for a while, but I convinced myself it wasn't serious. I was good at convincing myself of things that allowed me to continue my routines. When the doctor used the word terminal, I felt something inside me collapse quietly, not loudly, quietly. I remember standing by her bed, holding her hand, realizing how unfamiliar her hand felt in mine, not because I didn't love her, but because I hadn't held it enough. She looked at me with kindness. That was the worst part. There was no accusation in her eyes, just kindness and fatigue. She said, "You worked very hard." I wanted her to say I was a good husband. I wanted her to say she was proud of me. Instead, she acknowledged my work. It wasn't cruel, it was honest. After she passed, the house became very large, not physically larger, just emptier in a way that echoed. The people I had spent decades trying to impress sent flowers, a few messages. Then they went back to their lives. My phone stopped ringing within weeks, not because anyone was unkind, but because I had built relationships based on usefulness, and usefulness has an expiration date. Retirement came shortly after. There was a small gathering, a plaque with my name engraved incorrectly. Polite applause. I went home with a cardboard box of desk items and realized that the building I had devoted most of my waking hours to would function exactly the same without me the very next day. That realization didn't make me angry. It made me quiet. In old age, you start counting memories differently. You don't count achievements. You count moments when you felt genuinely seen. I found that my collection was smaller than I expected. What can't be fixed is not the missed promotions or the financial decisions. Those things don't haunt me. What can't be fixed are the conversations that never happened. The evenings I could have been home but chose to stay late for appearances. The habit of postponing affection as if it had an expiration date far in the future. Time doesn't send reminders. It just keeps going. People assume old age is filled with wisdom. It isn't always. Sometimes it's filled with clarity that arrives after the door has already closed. I don't sit here drowning in sorrow every day. There is gratitude, too. I had love. I had family. I had opportunities many people never get. But gratitude and regret can live in the same heart. They don't cancel each other out. If you're listening to me now, I'm not asking you to change your life overnight. I wouldn't even know how to give that kind of instruction. I'm just telling you what I learned too late. The people you're trying hardest to impress are often the ones who will remember you the least, and the people who will remember you are usually the ones you assume will always be there. I wish I had understood that presence is a form of love, not grand gestures, not speeches, just being there when it's inconvenient. I used to think I had endless time to become the person I wanted to be at home. I thought I could delay tenderness until I was less busy, less stressed, more established. But life doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It just unfolds, with or without your full attention. Now my days are simple. I make tea in the morning. I sit by the window. I watch people pass by who have no idea who I am. And that's fine. Fame was never the point. I just misunderstood where my efforts belonged. Sometimes my grandchildren visit. They sit with their phones, half listening, half present. I don't scold them. I see myself in them. I try to tell them small stories, not lectures, just pieces of memory. If any of this means something to you, you don't have to announce it. You don't have to agree or disagree. Just let it sit somewhere in your mind. I'm not asking you to abandon ambition or responsibility. Those things matter. They build stability. But don't trade every evening for approval. Don't postpone affection like it's a meeting you can reschedule. And don't assume the people who love you will always be patient. I have made peace with most of my life. Peace doesn't mean happiness. It just means I've stopped arguing with reality. I know I won't be remembered widely. Most of us aren't. And that's not tragic. What matters more is being remembered deeply by a few. I learned that late, very late. At 85, you don't dream of big futures anymore. You think about the next visit, the next conversation, the next quiet morning. There's a softness that comes with knowing your time is limited. Things stop pretending to be important. They either are or they aren't. I spent decades chasing applause from rooms that emptied quickly, and I overlooked the quiet rooms that would have welcomed me for a lifetime. That's my confession, not dramatic, not heroic, just human. If I could speak to my younger self, I wouldn't shout. I'd just place a hand on his shoulder and say, "They won't remember all this." But she will. The children will. Sit with them a little longer. Now the evenings are very quiet, sometimes peaceful, sometimes heavy, but I'm no longer trying to impress anyone. There's a strange relief in that. I only wish I had discovered that relief when there was more time left to share it.